you check the children? Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. Happy end of the year. I'm Cecil Laird.
Fuego, yeah.
And we are here to deliver our top lists for the end of the year. We're only doing 2 top lists this year. We're going to be doing the top 10 horror movies of the year, and then we're going to be doing the top 10 most anticipated projects of 2024. We, like last year, are not going to be taking part in the top 10 worst horror movies of the year.
The
like
Hate Brigade.
We have done that in the past, and, as someone that's made Dylan's New Nightmare now, and I have a new perspective on things, it's just, no one ever sets out to make a bad movie. There's no reason to highlight people as bad filmmakers. We talk about movies we don't like in our reviews, and those will just stay up, and that's as far as it needs to go.
No, I don't think there needs to be more spotlight on stinkers.
No, there doesn't. And neither of us have had a lot of time this year to watch horror TV series.
No,
so there will be no horror TV. I mean, I'll tell you guys the horror TV that I watched. I watched
horror TV.
The Last of Us, Castlevania Nocturne, and Creepshow Season 4 were the series. Oh, and the Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah,
that would be the tops.
That's the only one of note that I watched was Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah. So other than that, there's not much to talk about.
That's because it's funny again. I mean, so I had to make the time for that. But television with being back in school is just so difficult to invest that much time in something, which sucks because even non-horror stuff that I haven't had the chance to get to that I really want to.
Isn't that so cool? Like, God, how amazing would it be to have a name in the industry like Flanagan, where it's, it used to be, it was event TV is what they called it, right? When everyone would sit down at the same time to watch the show, because there wasn't TiVo. Fuck, we're way beyond TiVo now. There wasn't DVR, there wasn't a way to record everything. And so it's cool that Flanagan is essentially event programming. Anytime he comes out with something, people flood to it.
No, I mean,
and
we're going to get to one of his. Rightfully so. I didn't think that show was quite as good as like a Midnight Mass or Haunting of Hill House, but it was still solid.
I agree. I never did get through Bly Manor though. I got to be honest.
That's the only one I didn't finish either because he didn't direct and write every episode. That was one where he was more serving as the showrunner as opposed to like making it all about.
Plus,
him.
it was a love story as opposed to a
I'm
ghost
into
story.
that, though.
Apparently. Oh yeah, you are.
Yeah.
All right. So that all being said, that's our take on horror TV for the year. So boom, instead of a whole nother video, let's dive into our top 10 favorite horror movies of the year, Fuego. Starting with our number 10. And do you want to go first or should I?
You can go first.
All right, so my number 10
take a sip of my water.
Is going to be It Lives Inside. And allow me to affectionately say, fuck you, Jason Smith.
We love you, Sinister Cinema.
Yeah, Sinister
Both
Cinema
of you,
Reviews.
yes,
He's a friend of the
great.
channel. A personal friend, I would say, as well.
Yeah,
and he was giving me shit all year long for liking this movie as much as I did. So much so that he basically bullied me to get it off my list. And it was off my list for about the last 3 months. But as I was just reviewing it, my number 10 spot was being utilized by essentially not really a horror movie as much as a thriller. So I had to bump it. And as I thought more about It Lives Inside, I only saw it once this year. But when I saw it, I went to the theater to see it, and I really enjoyed it. This year was my year for horror because it was dominated by creature features. Yeah. And creature features are my favorite subgenre in horror. And what I loved about It Lives Inside, outside of being a well-made movie, there were legitimate scares. The playground attack scene, anyone that's seen the movie will know what I'm talking about, was visceral and terrifying.
Now I'm really disappointed that I missed it, because you had me at playground and attack, because that implies what I'm guessing could be happening.
Wait till you see, because you can't guess it, and it's so terrifyingly presented. I was like, Jesus Christ! And what I loved about it is it's an East Indian, lore based, on the Indian culture, or a creature from the Indian culture that we don't normally. This is the first time I've seen it represented, at least in this form, in a feature film. It's sort of similar.
Is it in English or is it?
No, it's
is
in
it
English. Yeah, it's in English.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there's subtitles when she's speaking her language to her family and stuff like that at times. I'm not sure. The only language from that area that I'm aware of is Urdu. I'm not sure if that's what they're speaking or not.
Okay.
So I don't want to offend and get it wrong, but yes, I believe that does happen at times when she's speaking to her family. Again, I saw this movie 6 months ago when it first came out, but it left an impression, scares-wise, creature-wise, and I gotta say, I loved the ending to this movie. It was a really cool confrontation. There was, there was some practicality to the things, to the proceedings, as well as some CG augmentation at times. But the very end, before we cut to credits, was one of the most effective endings in a horror movie that I've seen along these lines. Because and the main actress, kudos to her, she's pushed to the brink by the time you see this last shot of the film.
It really makes me wonder why Jason, like what problems Jason had with it.
I honestly don't know. Like, it would be funny. He and I should do a live stream talking about it, to be honest, because I really don't understand his vitriolic hate for the film. And maybe it's just things that I was blinded to, but I sat there, I was by myself. There was only like 3 other people in the theater, and I just let it wash over me, and I dug the hell out of it. I really enjoyed the film. And it was just one of the creature features that blew away my expectations this year. So that's my number 10.
There you go. Hell yeah, man. Well, so my number 10 is actually a film that I saw right at the beginning of the year, and it's still chilled, and it's from one of my favorite working directors today. Now, some people may have seen a film or two of his, but John Schwab, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it improperly, but he did a little film that went direct to VOD called Candyland. And so this is a film where, so it's half like tale about sex workers, but then it veers into being like a full-on slasher, because you have your lot lizards at this truck stop sort of area, and there's one male sex worker for those with that particular kink, and then there's
Fuego's sitting on a clown, just so you know. That's where these noises are. Yeah, and then there's a few different women in this too, but there's somebody who she escapes from this religious family, and she's kind of on the run, and they take her under their wing, these girls at this sort of spot, and things then veer into murder, and murder of a rather brutal variety too. The name of this one particular actress who really shines in it, I am trying to remember, but I don't want to steer stuff off. Well, no, go ahead. While you look it up, I will say we've done, I think, 3 review roundups this entire year, and I do remember this being one that I was super surprised at how much you were talking it up during the review roundup. I think it was the first review roundup that we did of the year, and you were talking so glowingly about this. I was like, damn, I really need to see this, and then I spaced it the entire year.
It pivots from commentary about the sex industry into just pretty pure brutality with like the kills are vicious, not like of the insanely creative gory variety per se, but I mean just like the implications of this character who we find out is actually doing this stuff. There is a little bit of a mystery element involved, but I mean John Schwab does these really just gritty, grimy films. Body Brokers is still my personal favorite of his with Frank Grillo, but I mean, Ida Red, he did the movie Let Me Make You a Martyr with the very controversial Marilyn Manson in it. I mean, yeah, his stuff is... He put another film out this year called Little Dixie with Grillo, which is not very good, unfortunately, one of my least favorite things of his, but this just really balances the tones very well. There's a girl who's trying to get out of the industry just as all of these murders start taking place and stuff, and so it's layered, it's nuanced. This is one that, if I remember correctly, Jason Smith dug this one too, when him and I got the chance to speak about it. So, yeah, stood the test. I think this came out in January, man. So, yeah, Candyland. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but it's rentable on VOD, and definite recommend for me. Anything John Schwab, pretty much will always get my attention because I've seen all of his films, and he's only been working for a few years now, but most of it's filmed in Oklahoma, and just always compelling, and just that grit, grime of his storytelling it's very distinctive. So
okay, yeah, fair enough. Next, I'm going to go with Cobweb. So my number 9 is Cobweb, and I'm actually going to have to change the order of my next one because Cobweb is very similar to another horror movie that came out this year that is also on my list. It was higher, but I'm going to bring it down to Cobweb's level because they're so similar, and I'll talk about that one next. But Cobweb is a really fun movie that not a lot of people saw. It was one of the few that had a very limited theatrical run, and it was only in like 4 theaters locally.
That's where I saw it, was in the theater. But
Yeah,
I had
me
to
too.
drive a little far to get to it because it wasn't like it was at AMC, but it was only like a small sprinkling of
Right,
their
I went to the
theaters and
Arrowhead one
Yeah.
to see it, and what was great about it was that it is a peak Halloween season film. Like, it takes place during the Halloween season, and it feels like a Halloween season movie in the same vein that Hocus Pocus does, that Trick or Treat does. Like, very effectively feels like a Halloween season movie. Some movies try, and they like throw a pumpkin or two in a couple of shots and call it Halloween season. This one genuinely captured it. And what I really loved about it was the acting in specific.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony Starr, who plays Homelander on The Boys, plays the father of this little boy, and
Lizzie
Kaplan plays the mother.
Love
Lizzie
her.
Kaplan, who we love, who played in the 2nd season of Castle Rock, the younger version of the chick from Misery.
Annie Wilkes.
Annie Wilkes, right, yeah. And so we knew she could play crazy, and she was, she was out there in Cobweb, and Anthony Starr got to lean into his creep factor, and then the little boy basically had to deal with essentially a creature in the walls, and it was just a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed, like, the creature effects get a little silly at times towards the end. A lot of people said they liked it up until the 3rd act.
I'm in that camp.
Okay, see, I liked it all the way through, but I could see why there was drop-off, because the 3rd act becomes a CG creature movie, which is the same for another movie this year that will be my next call.
And it was that similarity that like made me keep it out of my top 10 because until like the last 20 minutes or so, I was so locked into, especially the 3 performances from the parents and the kid. The kid is also in a film that is on my list that we'll be getting to.
So yeah, I really enjoyed Cobweb, and that's why it was my number 9.
Nice. Okay. So my number 9 is a film that I believe it is a Shudder exclusive, and this is one of a few that I saw way back at the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival this year, which is a part of the Phoenix Film Festival. So shout out to Monty Yazzie, Jason Carney, and the fact that we've had the chance to cover that festival for a number of years now at this particular point. I think like 6-7 years now, something like that. Always a pleasure, and the programming is always spot on, which is why a number of these releases are in here. But this is called Brooklyn 45, and this is so it's not just super horror in the fact that it's more in its themes that it explores of life after death, and how this guy's wife took her own life, and so he brings in 1945, right after World War II has ended, him and a bunch of his old military buddies come, and it's done very much like a stage play. So it's a one location movie. Yep, but with exceptional acting from everybody throughout. Room, even. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Aside from when they're arriving early on. And so it's from the same director who did We Are Still Here, which was a Barbara Crampton one from a number of years ago.
Ted or something like that.
I think so, yeah.
I follow him on Twitter, and forgive me, Ted, for fucking up your last name there, buddy.
Yeah, I should be.
But he constantly retweets people that are, that praise the film, and well deserved, because I think it was a highly accomplished film as well. I just happened to like a few others.
Ted
yeah, that's why I like
I'm totally butchering pronunciation here.
Ted G.
But Ted G, yeah, exactly right. But this was one of my favorites because of the fact that it was just like this ensemble, and the way they were able to build tension, most notably with the nature of a particular character who shows up a little bit later in the story, and you're trying to figure out, is this person what they're being accused of? And so this was more so like a tense dramatic thriller that had supernatural elements to it, but it was really just it could have easily been a stage play, and I would imagine that it could be recreated in that essence and stuff, but all the characters were distinctive and fascinating in their own rights, and it was just like peeling back the layers. There's one almost like torture scene in particular that is perpetuated by this woman, and you're just like, damn, gangster, all right. She did have to be as bad as the boys with, trying to see if somebody is what they are being accused of. And so, yeah, Shudder exclusive and one of my favorites of the year. So,
and
yeah,
Ted does say that it's a film that comes from the heart of himself and everyone involved. And you can tell that
cool
these are
period
filmmakers that just wanted to tell a really good story and in a high quality way, but not necessarily with the highest budget. And I think they definitely accomplished that.
Yeah, but they did a lot with such a little budget, and that's where the writing really has to be strong in that regard for things to be compelling and solid. So
agreed. So my number 8 is going to be the film that Cobweb was very much like, but came out a few months before, called The Boogeyman, which was a adaptation of a Stephen King short. Yep.
More so like a continuation of it, honestly.
Right,
The more that I thought about it.
You said it pretty much started and stopped in the office, right? The psych office.
Oh yeah, and flashbacks obviously, but the fact that it continues the story of the Desmalchian character when he shows up early on, and and it's got the girl from Yellow Jackets in it. The name of the actress is eluding me, but
I hadn't watched Yellow Jackets yet. Now I'm 6 episodes into it. So I need to rewatch Boogeyman to see who we're talking about.
I've been wanting to buy it on Blu-ray because being a completist with all my Stephen King adaptations.
I will. I'll eventually get it too, because again, it is a creature feature from this year that I really liked, and it is one of those where the third act becomes a sort of CG heavy creature attack and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed it. Yeah. It was very scarily presented, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of really cool shots that made me jump and react, and I can't remember the personal story as well anymore because I saw it so long ago.
It's been a while now,
But I think it was the one where the therapist was trying to get her to remember what was making her scared, but get past it, like she was just scared of the dark. And then they played that through. I really enjoyed the film. I was really pleased with it. I tend to be a sucker for these kinds of movies. Like a couple of years ago, Come Play was a really cool CG heavy creature feature.
Also PG-13, if I remember correctly.
But it had a lot of heart in it. It had a really cool ending. And
the dynamic between the two sisters, their chemistry on screen was just very believable and endearing. And so
the Flanagan movie from a few years back that doesn't get nearly as much play as it should. The one about
was the one with the butterfly.
The butterfly, yeah. I can't remember what it was called. Before I Wake, I think you're right. Yeah, and that movie's phenomenal. In the same vein, And I love these kinds of movies that do it well, and The Boogeyman is one that did it well. And again, I'm very forgiving with CG stuff, a lot more so than a lot of my contemporaries in the review field. And so I just don't let it bother me as much. Sometimes it's very apparent where I'm like, eesh. But for the most part, like, if it's not right in my face, I'm like, okay, I buy it. Like, that's cool. And this was one that I totally bought and I enjoyed. And again, Cobweb was just very similar in structure and execution. And so that's why they're going to be right next to each other on my list now.
Yeah, it was in consideration for me, but there were just other things that I thought had to be mentioned in comparison. So cool. I'm gonna jump to my number 8 then, and this was the return of a franchise that I think had been floundering since its 6th installment.
Yeah,
because the final
that you came late to.
Yeah, I did. I had only seen the first 2 Saw films, and then when Spiral was coming out, I binged all of them.
So we could do a tier list, I think.
Yep. And so this is the strongest one since the 6th film, in my estimation. And I forget the director, Kevin Greertert. I don't know. He had done a few of the previous installments, and saw X-Man after stumbling with Jigsaw and Spiral. I thought that this was a total return to form. Interesting having Tobin Bell at his most sympathetic, which was an angle that they have explored. Making him the main character. Yeah, making him the main character. This is an angle
for the first time.
Yeah, it's an angle they had explored with him being a more sympathetic presence, most notably in the 6th film that I talked about, which had, all of the stuff about the hideous aspect of the American medical industry. How you can pay into insurance and just have your coverage lost if you. So this was very much like a revenge sort of tale where you felt the least sympathy for the people who are being put into these traps.
Yeah, because they you literally see they all did Jigsaw wrong, and so they put you in as an audience member in the position of literally cheering for the slasher. Whereas most people watch slasher movies to cheer for the slasher anyway, especially 10 entries on.
Oh, yeah.
They literally gave you a reason, like a John Wickian reason.
Yeah, without spoiling
dead
stuff,
puppy
but-
reason
Yeah.
to get back at everyone.
Yeah.
Smart move, man.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
smart move.
Yeah, and it does have a couple very graphic kills. One in particular with them cutting on the leg and having the suck fluids out and getting into gross territory right there. So, is it as good as 1, 2, or 3? Probably not. But once again, strongest entry since 6, and it was successful enough that we already have Saw 11 coming next year.
You may see that appear
So
on
good
the
on
list.
you. Good on you.
Coming up.
Yep.
All right, so that one did not make my list, although it was a very good entry in the film franchise.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
Not one, it wasn't one that stood out as like really banger for me.
Yeah.
The next one, I think I'm gonna swap my next two as well. I'm gonna go with Dark Harvest for my number 6.
Which was one that I wanted. This is the Scarecrow one, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I
so
did not see this, unfortunately. It was a VOD that I didn't get around to.
this is one that I saw for sure because Jason Smith told me I needed to.
Yeah, it's been in development for a while, from what I understand.
Yeah, I recall that as well. So I think I heard Jason talk about it. I think I saw Lee Drum Dums talking about it as well. And so I reached out. Yes, it was because of Jason that I reached out to the company for a screener.
Oh, nice.
And they sent me a screener. And I watched it, and I had such a great time. It is easily the best Scarecrow horror movie I've ever seen.
Okay.
Easily. And I've
Even
seen
better
a
than
bunch.
Night of the Scarecrow.
Night of the Scarecrow, dude, better than Urban Legend 3, Harvest.
I forgot about
you know what I
that.
mean?
Yeah.
Which is my, or not Urban Legend 3, sorry. Children of the Corn 3, Urban Harvest, yeah. I think there was Scarecrow action in that. I know in the other Children of the Corn movies there were, but this is the coolest Scarecrow creature. And they gave the whole. It was like Grease. The way I put it in the review is it was like
kind of a
Grease
cool look from what I
mixed
remember.
with Night of the Scarecrow. It was basically that, and it was
Because
really
it's like
awesome.
a local legend about this.
And it takes
Scarecrow,
place
the
in
nature of the
like the
Scarecrow.
50s or 60s.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so you find out that this town has an annual hunt where all the boys from the high school try and hunt down the creature at the on Halloween. Otherwise, if it crosses like in Dogma, if it crosses the threshold of the church of the town, basically the town will end. And so they have to do this every single year, and there's more in the lore than even the town as a whole knows.
This is
and
one
it's
that
really cool.
Chauncey K. Robinson actually sang the praises of as well, I believe.
Shout out to Chauncey, who, by the way, her new show on the Dead Meat channel is coming up pretty soon.
Very nice.
They shot
congrats
it.
to her, man.
Yeah, dude. She deserves it. She's awesome. She's been on the channel a number of times.
Yeah, she did the elevator pitch with you, right?
Indeed, amongst other things. So shout out to Chauncey. Shout out to Dead Meat's channel, of course. But yeah, Night of the Scarecrow, Dark Harvest is definitely a lot of fun, and that's why it took my number 7 position.
Okay, dope. Well, jumping into my number 7 then is a vampire movie that they had been trying to develop for a long time. It went through various directors, various iterations, various cast members coming and going, and so on and so forth. And one of my favorite directors, man, even though I didn't like the superhero film he did with, I think it was Nat Wolff, one of the Wolf kids, but Last Voyage of the Demeter. So taking that single chapter from the Dracula novel and expanding it into a full-on feature. This was gothic. This had a great cast. I dug the look of the creature, even if there is like a fair amount of CGI, and the look of the creature can be compared to other vampire stuff that we have seen previously. It's got a few of my favorite deaths as far as like vampires burning up. There's the kid who was in Cobweb. He's the kid on the boats, and yeah. So he had a couple of films that came out this year that he was really good in. The cast is stacked. I mean, even so, Corey Hawkins, who I really dig. The Smallchin's in this one too. Javier Botet, he plays the Nosferatu Dracula
Javier
character.
Botet is awesome. He played Mama and a number of other things as well.
Yeah, so André Øvredal, he did the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. He also did the exceptional Autopsy of Jane Doe, so it's very well directed. I'm just bummed that this movie bombed at the box office, man, because it's definitely going to leave Universal less inclined to put a mid-budget together to make something like this. It's going to continue to be nothing but these lower budget sort of things, which granted breeds creativity, but still, I mean, this was one that they were hoping was going to be a lot more successful. Maybe if they didn't release it in the summer, if they had gone, like closer to the Halloween season, it could have been more successful. But I just dug this flick a lot, man. I was impressed with it. I was sad that I didn't get to go to press for it, but I was busy with school anyway. So that is my number 7 is what I believe we're on. Last Voyage of the Dignita.
I like that. That was one of my alternates. So definitely enjoyed that film as well.
Sweet.
My number 6 is going to be a smaller film that I believe is available on Shudder that we enjoyed. It's the film So Nice we interviewed the filmmakers twice.
It's on my list too. I'll get to it in a little bit.
All right. So From Black is the film I'm talking about, and this is one of those rare films that can only come from independent filmmakers.
Agreed.
Because a studio would never really back such a film, and they show why it's important for independent filmmakers to maintain control in a lot of instances, because From Black is a phenomenal story with horror elements as opposed to a straight up horror movie with like slasher bits and everything. This is very much a story driven film with horror elements that just explores parts of horror that movies don't generally take time to explore.
True.
These things that they're exploring in this film, while it's not the, like the horror isn't necessarily the focus of it, but what is happening is a part of what happens in a lot of horror movies. So they are, in essence, exploring parts of a horror movie, and it's done so well, and it's got the emotional punch towards the end that I absolutely love. I did tear up in this movie, and I just enjoy the hell out of it again, so much so that we interviewed the filmmakers once, and
the writer and the director.
The writer and the director, the co-writer and the
co-writer,
the
co-writer, director,
and they, unfortunately, the footage got corrupted, so we had to do the interview again.
Yeah, which they were sweet enough to do.
They were very awesome to do again.
Very accommodating.
And they're just awesome people, and From Black is just unique in the horror genre. Like, there's very few films like it, and the ones that are like it in my mind because they also bring that emotional punch that a lot of horror movies don't bother with.
Oh yeah.
And so I absolutely loved From Black.
Yep, it's higher up on my list, so I'll get to gush on it here in a little bit. But jumping to my number 6 is one that's not a full-on horror film, but it has horrific elements to it. It is Ari Aster's a project he has been developing for years and years at this point. He even said that he made Midsommar and her Hereditary being his first film. He's like, I did these more kind of studio-centric projects so that I could find funding to make this film that I have been working on long before he made any of those. It's 3 hours. It is challenging, but it is the first act, especially because it's a 3-act sort of setup. The first act made me feel more anxious and just like uncomfortable than a lot of stuff that I have watched in recent memory, man. I mean, it's in contention for that because it starts out with, what a performance from Joaquin Phoenix, dude. I mean, sensational stuff here as this dude who has anxieties himself and is like fearful of the world because of his fractured relationship with his mother, which is something that you can tell Ari Aster's got some mommy issues, man, especially the way the third act pans out. There's also elements of interpretability because the second act goes psychedelic, third act, those who I've talked to about it, they're like, did this character show up in the third act or was it just in his head? There's debatable sort of aspects about that.
Oh, that was wacky.
Take some cues from The Wall. I mean, this was an artistic statement, man, and it's not full-on horror, but it has enough, like, just unsettling elements to it, and a chock block full of weirdness, dude. It's a challenging watch, for sure, but it is definitely, if you like Ari Aster, and, like...
Did you ever say the title?
Avant-garde film, Beau's Afraid. Yeah.
I
hope I did. If in case not, I mean, yeah, you want to talk about, like, a performance from an Academy Award-winning actor like Napoleon? No way, dude. The performance of the year by Joaquin that would need consideration is, Beau's Afraid.
Dude, the one while it's not on my list, because I honestly still don't. I just watched it for the first time 2 days ago, and I still don't really
watched
know
it
if
a
I
number
liked
of months
it or not.
ago. Yeah, it sits with you though, man.
It does. It does. And the first act, the first hour, is basically a continually worsening panic attack. Like, that's the way it felt to me, and I was like, Jesus, how are they going to keep this up for 3 hours? And then it like changes gears. Every hour it changes gears. And it's very interesting with a whole stage play sequence is as best as I'll describe it without spoiling. That whole sequence is one of the most artistic, artsy, beautifully done, yet I don't get it things.
It's just it's
but it
strange
ends,
for the
but
sake
it
of
also
strange,
it sets up the reason why Joaquin Phoenix should be nominated for an Oscar for the film.
I agree.
The reunification of the family,
yeah,
without spoiling anything,
yeah,
was just, it blew me away. Again, as a father myself,
yeah.
like seeing this scene play out, I was like, I was so affected.
Yeah.
So that's why I can't say that I dislike the movie, but I just don't know that I can say I really like the movie, because it's so many different things. But that in and of itself is, I think, a feather in its cap. So I can see why it's on your list, even though it's not on mine. Yeah,
it's one that, I mean, like, film heads that I have spoken to are just like, wow, course, what? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is A24. Keep that in mind. Also, unsuccessful at the box office, unfortunately. So this is another one that, you know, based on the esteem of Ari, and the fact that Midsommar and Hereditary were so successful, I mean, people thought that, or at least A24 certainly did, that it was gonna, with the amount of money they put into the budget to make this, man. So, yeah, what a performance, though, and what a weird yet in many ways brilliant statement, like I said. So, yeah.
So that leads me to my number 5, which, as I look at the list, I feel like this might have needed to be a little bit lower than what it is. But I enjoyed it so much coming out of the theater when I wasn't anticipating liking it as much as I did, and that's Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. I had a really fun time with this film, and
sequel already greenlit.
Sequel already greenlit. It's obviously a love letter to slashers of the Grindhouse era, but with a fresh
on the
coat
trailer
of paint.
from Grindhouse, right?
Of course. But it's not grimy the way the trailer was presented.
No, it
it's
doesn't have
very
that
much
film
a
grain
new It's a current film presentation. But there's so many throwbacks to the old school slashers, and it's done so well as a slasher, because I, once again, context for those of you that don't know me that well, if you're new to the channel, I love gore in horror films, and Eli Roth has always been someone that provides the gore. He definitely loves his gore, and I think a slasher is only aided by gore. That's why I think PG-13 slashers are really tough to find quality compared to rated R slashers. This is rated R through and through, and it leans into it, and it's so fun. And the third act goes a little bit wonky towards the end. I wish we got more of the Thanksgiving table. That's as much as I'll say without spoiling.
Which is a recreation of a scene from the trailer. There's a number of scenes.
I feel
from
like
the trailer
there's
that are
so much
recreated.
gold that could have been had there, but we get away from the scene so quickly in my eyes. But the film was just really well done. It knew what it was. The acting was so appropriate for what it was doing. The gore was awesome. And the opening scene was way better than I thought it was going to be, because I knew that it was going to be a crazy Black Friday event that led everything off, and I was like, oh boy. But it was really well done, and it was really thrilling. And so, yeah, Thanksgiving just got to number 5 and didn't drop below. I really enjoyed the film.
Yeah, it would be an honorable mention for me. I had it as an alternate. And yeah, man, I enjoyed it a lot, much more so than I was anticipating, because Roth sometimes can be a little hit and miss for me. Like, I love Frozen and I love Cabin Fever, but then I wasn't so into the Hostel films. And
he didn't make Frozen.
He did.
Adam Green made Frozen.
Did Adam Green make Frozen? Yeah. Oh, god damn it, I'm an idiot. Okay, well, maybe he helped produce it or something.
He might have helped produce it, but I know he
that's
also
right, because
helped produce Aftershock.
Adam Green after Hatchet made Frozen, which is still, I was talking about that film just the other day, because I
love Frozen.
Yeah, I'm like, it's around the holidays, it's chilly and snowy, and such a messed up setup after I watched the pool the other day. I was like, anyway, okay, cool. So we are on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so my number 5 is a film that I didn't really know what to expect because of the fact that I saw the trailers, but, you know, I haven't been super into what Legendary is doing with Godzilla, but Godzilla Minus One, dude, was, it would be higher on the list if I feel like it was more pure horror, but the fact that it wasn't pure horror is what makes it so good, because it explores this relationship right after World War II between two people who are just kind of randomly paired together based on circumstance and their relationship. But also, I mean, you get such great stuff with him and those guys that he becomes chummy with, that he's out on these boats pulling up these old mines and stuff. And Godzilla was, Defender Godzilla is fine, dude, but I like Monster Godzilla destroying things. I even have a soft spot in some ways for the 90s one that Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin made.
I like that.
I like it, you know, and I'm kind of unapologetic about that. The soundtrack is phenomenal, but so yeah, this film, if it was, the only thing is I wish it had maybe a little more destruction at times, you know, and a little more monsters, like, because the opening scene where he's smushing and biting and spitting out and all that stuff is so just pure horror. And so it's really the dramatics, while being incredibly impressive and very engaging, are one of the only things that make it not rank higher on a horror list for me. So that's my explanation for only having it at 5.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I will touch on that a bit later.
Yep, I figured as much.
My number 4 is going to be one that came out of nowhere. We did a trailer reaction for it. I was like, this looks awesome. And then it came out, and I kept seeing tweet after tweet after tweet saying, this movie's awesome. I had no idea. The first act is just the beginning, and it's crazy. And it's another Hulu release from this year, and that's No One Will Save You.
Yeah.
I love No One Will Save You.
For me, yeah.
Yeah, it might be my favorite alien invasion horror movie of all time. I really loved it. The first third is typically what's reserved for the last third of most alien invasion horror movies. Yeah. And so it's like, where's it going to go from here? And it just keeps upping the ante, upping the creature size, and upping the story ante. Like, just so much interesting stuff. I still don't know how much I enjoy the very, very end.
I like it,
honestly.
And
the resolution of the film. I do like it because, again, it's unique amongst the genre. So it maintains that throughout the film, and that, to me, made it worth its weight in gold. Again, I never knew where it was going to go, because the first act is usually the third act of these kinds of alien films. And so I was like, wow, we're in uncharted territory, and it's just trying to do cooler and cooler stuff. And the main actress did a wonderful job.
Great, yeah.
So yeah, No One Will Save You.
She has to do a lot without. I mean, most people know it has a gimmick to it about the fact that there's no talking, and it was the far superior.
Like one line of dialogue.
It was the far superior of the two quiet movies that I saw, because Silent Night was the other one, doing the same kind of thing.
John Woo, not so goodness.
Although that one at least had a little bit more of an explanation for why the character isn't talking, but it's anyway. We're not here to talk about that.
Yeah, No One Will Save You is essentially a film version of, as a comic book fan, the Nuff Said Marvel Comics that they did for a month, where there was no dialogue in any of the Marvel Comics for that month. So it was all stories told through the pictures. And this is like that to me, where you don't have to focus on dialogue. You just let the story, literally, it's the perfect example of show, don't tell.
Exactly.
Because they don't even get a chance to tell. They have to show the entire movie. And that's why it's number 4. Like, there's no movies that really have to work within those boundaries. And if they haven't done nearly as good a job as No One Will Save You.
Yeah. This, I mean, it's obviously much more challenging to get so much across without saying anything, and I feel like this one, it was definitely in contention to maybe make some noise on my list. But okay, so going with a bigger film at my number 4, because I didn't like Scream 5 very much, man. I was not a super fan, but I thought that Scream 6 was a major step up. This new core 4 of sorts, which we know are probably, who knows how many of them are coming back at this point. With
doesn't sound like
Scream
many.
7 is in like a total disarray mode right now. They
As
just
of
lost
today,
their director.
Lost the director, yeah.
Christopher Landon, I believe, the guy who did Happy Death Day and Freaky. You know, his aesthetic seemed like a perfect fit with the guys from Radio Silence departing. But yeah, I liked the core 4 so much more in this. I thought Brea was great. Ortega still kind of annoys me a little bit, but seeing Kirby come back she was one of my favorite presences in Scream 4, and so having that legacy character come back, it was disappointing not to see, Nev because of contractual disputes and the money and her thinking she was worth more, and she was probably going to be in an even more limited role, Courtney Cox was fine in this one, but I've never been super over the moon for the Gale character anyway, but I just thought the writing, the kills, the pacing, everything, it was a little bit on the sillier side compared to 5. 5 I thought was fairly serious a lot of the time, but I don't know, everybody was just... they appealed to me more, maybe because I had already got the chance to get to know them in 5, and so I was just a little more on board with the chemistry amongst all their characters for this one. Shame about, Barrea not coming back for 7, but Barrera, yeah. But, yeah, man, I thought this was such a step up, and it was fun, and it was, it was just, I mean, it's my favorite after 1 and 2 and 4, so there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4th out of 6.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Oh, well. Well,
All right.
because 3 and 5 I don't particularly like very much.
I get it. So my number 3 rather, is going to be Godzilla -1. I love creature movies. Again, creature features dominate my list this year, and I've always loved Godzilla, especially the American Godzilla stuff we've been getting, because historically the Toho Godzilla stuff has always seemed very silly to me. The man in the suit stuff I've just never really been able to get into. The first one I really got into was Godzilla 1985. The one where they took, I think, the Godzilla 1984 from Japan,
they had Perry Mason,
and they added Perry Mason, Raymond Burr, and then had like a couple of different scenes and maybe a different ending and stuff, but yeah, I enjoyed that as a kid, and then I enjoyed the 1998 Godzilla because that was like my Godzilla. I was 18 and I was like, oh, cool. I love creature movies, and this is a really giant creature movie. I actually got sad at the end when he gets trapped on the bridge and missiled from the side. And
I like the stuff with the babies too, which is like little mini.
That was
raptors,
silly. Yeah, they were mini raptors. Again,
Uh.
as a huge fan of the Jurassic Park series, I was like, boo, this is just raptor ripoff.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I still enjoyed the film quite a bit. And then when we got the 2014 Godzilla, Gareth Edwards, I was pissed that we kept cutting away from the main character, Godzilla. But I enjoyed it, and then I loved Godzilla King of the Monsters. Kong Skull Island was a ton of fun.
Yeah, Skull Island.
Godzilla vs. Kong was silly, and we haven't gotten Godzilla X Kong yet.
Yep, next year.
But I did watch Shin Godzilla, and that was so boring for every non-Godzilla bit because it was constantly... It was basically commentating on the whole fact that there has to be so many meetings, the red tape of government when there's an emergency. So there has to be meeting after meeting after meeting, and they showed all these meetings, and it was so boring, even though Godzilla was kind of creepy. But Godzilla -1 from trailer 1, I was like, damn, this looks awesome, because they go a more CG Godzilla instead of a suity Godzilla. And when I finally sat down and watched it, it was the first of these kaiju movies where I actually cared about the story of the film.
Yeah.
The disgraced pilot, the kamikaze pilot, right?
Who was scared to die.
Yeah, who ends up building a not quite family, but every time Godzilla shows up, his life gets worse. And like Godzilla itself, from the very opening scene, is terrifying.
Yeah.
Even in its smaller version, it's still like a beefed up T-Rex, and it's so terrifying.
I love the way they shot the swimming almost Jaws.
Yeah, the Jaws
dude.
thing where its head is right up behind him. Like, every time Godzilla was on screen, it was terrifying. The human story was amazing. The atomic breath is the coolest I've ever seen, leaving literally atomic fallout with the blowback and the suckback and all of that stuff, which actually plays into the story as well. This movie is just phenomenal. It caught me so off guard with how good it was, and that's been the case across the board. Like, I saw earlier, it was like, based on 10 reviews, it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm like, 10 reviews? But then it never dipped below 98%.
Yeah, I think it's
crazy.
still hovering around 98 or 99, something like that.
It's crazy.
And also for the budget,
how much people have loved
it's like 15 million.
Less than 15
less
million.
Than 15
the guy
million,
talks about because the exchange rate's not quite right.
Which is maybe why we don't have more Godzilla. But you know, sometimes just having to work within those constraints. That's why they had to have such a well-developed.
The director is a special effects artist by trade.
Gotcha.
So he actually went home and did a lot of the work himself
I
otherwise would have been, paid for.
Okay.
So he was doing double shifts
Godzilla
and stuff
looked
like that.
good, man.
He looked
really
terrifyingly
good
scary. There was one time where they shoot him from far away, walking back into the ocean, where he moves a little janky. But outside of that, it was fucking phenomenal and terrifying, and just an amazing, amazing film. Both creature film, horror film, and just film overall. Definitely. Because it would be, in my overall films of the year, it would still be my top 3. So
Gotcha.
yeah, there you go. That's my number 3.
Awesome. Okay. So jump into my number 3. It's a film we already touched upon, but From Black. This we also saw at the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival. Coming from a background of comedy, Anna Camp is so engaging and heartbreaking as well, with the struggles that she is going through as somebody who is in recovery. But then on top of that, with the loss of a child to boot, man, I mean, it's much more on the dramatic side, as Cecil touched upon. But I feel like, similar to what we were just saying with Godzilla, the fact that it's not just a bombarding you with the horror. It takes a different approach of really just deep cutting emotion. I mean, the dream scene with the kid being taken and stuff that you see in the trailers is gut-wrenching. Yeah, absolutely destroying. And I don't even have kids, and it still, affected me. So I can't even imagine, seeing something like you. I know I'm not gonna name the other film that it's been compared to, but I feel like it is distinctively different enough, especially with the route that they go with the revelation of what is going to be brought about. I think it stands on its own, and we saw some of the back and forth about, this is just ripping this film off that I'm not going to name, but I don't know, man. I feel like this was distinctive and different enough, and most definitely because of Camp's performance and just getting out of her comfort zone and showing her strength as a dramatic actress after doing Pitch Perfect and lots of comedy work. Sometimes these comedic actors, as we saw with Robin Williams and Jim Carrey, there is a darkness that can be tapped into within. And her performance is one of my personal favorites of the year. It's right up there, man. So that's my number 3.
Awesome. Okay, so that's going to go to my number 2, which is going to be Talk to Me. So this is by a couple of filmmakers from Australia.
Yeah.
And
they are the
YouTubers. Yep, YouTubers on the channel Raka Raka. They did a bunch of awesome videos that you probably know, including a essentially psychopathic Ronald McDonald series, along with they did Harry Potter versus Star Wars, and just a bunch of fight videos and things. So they had demonstrated their abilities behind the camera and to shoot action, and this was a horror film they wanted to make. And at one point, a big studio actually offered to step in and help make it, but they would have had creative input, and ultimately the filmmakers decided, no, we'll raise the funds ourselves and then sell it. They ended up selling it to A24, and it ended up being one of the most successful horror films of the year.
Yeah, there's
it's
a
already
bidding
been
war
greenlit for a
after
sequel
Sundance.
and possibly even a prequel as well.
Yeah.
And so much so that the gimmick, the plaster hand that you grab in the film, has been
you can
already,
get one
you
now,
can
right?
buy one. Yep. Through the A24 shop you can get one, which I
Surprise,
almost
surprise,
did, but it's like $150.
It is pricey.
But yeah, so Talk to Me was a shining example of what a cool gimmick can be nowadays if it's done by well-made filmmakers, right? This is a mummified plaster hand that if you grab and say talk to me, a dead spirit appears across the table, and if you say I let you in, it takes over your body, and it has 60 seconds or something, and then people are supposed to pull you out of it. But what happens if you don't abide by those rules? And it just spirals, and the main actress is so phenomenal, and I'm just so impressed with the whole film. It had genuine scares, awesome effects, well done filmmaking, all over the place. I'm so excited for the future of these guys, and highly jealous as well.
Yeah. Well, it's not my number 2, so I guess you'll know when I talk about it. But so my
So
number
sorry.
2, yeah. So my number 2 is another one from the International Horror Sci-Fi Film Festival. It is a Shudder exclusive as well. Rebirth.
Oh,
So
wow.
I saw a few films that had
I
like
actually saw this one with
that
you.
had like bringing kids back to life, or at least the attempts to do it. This one just barely edged out From Black because we saw them within the same like span of a week or so. But this one I revisited recently, and Marin Ireland and Judy Reyes, like just the quirkiness of their relationship is so compelling. But
Judy Reyes, I think, from Scrubs, right?
yeah, from Scrubs. You also have Brenda Wool is in there in a smaller role. She was on the Mr. Mercedes show. This film is just gut-wrenching in grief in a very similar fashion to what you see in From Black. So there are similarities about both of these. You know, they were pretty much neck and neck for this spot on my list. But the fact that what I appreciated about this one was, as opposed to whereas From Black goes about it from a like religious ritualistic route, this film approaches bringing a dead one back from a very scientific route. And I dug the manner in which Marin Ireland goes about, this has been research of hers for decades at this particular point, and the fact that she's taking like it's essentially stem cells being used, and the manner in which she goes about extraction and all this different stuff. I mean, it was darkly funny at times too. I mean, this film just, man, great performances. The ending hits you like a gut punch as well. So yeah, man, Rebirth. I liked it even more the second time, which is also the case with my one, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'm really curious what your one is now, man, because
My number 1 is a movie that, again, I was recommended by Jason Smith. Or he didn't recommend it. He said he was going to see it because it was the same director as the director of Terrified from 2000, I think, 18 or 19.
This is your one. Okay.
Yep. And I was like, I loved Terrified. Terrified is one of
Yeah.
my favorite horror movies of the last decade.
Excellent. Argentinian director, I
Yep,
believe,
yep.
right?
And now this film is also in my top 10 of the last decade.
Oh, wow.
This director has done 2 films. Both of them are in my top 10 horror movies of the last decade. And I'm talking about When Evil Lurks. This one I went to the theater to see. I used it was again like Cobweb in very small release, just a few theaters. Went to AMC, used my A-list, and I walked into the theater not knowing anything, just that Jason said he was going to see it because of this, and I was like, that's reason enough for me.
Yeah.
Walked out of there blown away, and just feeling like I hadn't felt after a horror movie in many, many years, where I was caught off guard. I was going to have imagery that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And
Something early on in this one, man.
there was 3 different times.
Yeah.
3 different times in this film where something happened that caught me off guard that I'm never going to forget. And like that alone is worth its weight in gold as a fan of horror that's as old as I am, that's been watching horror for as long as I have.
Yeah.
You just don't see that much new under the horror sun, and a lot of this was just so well done, from the from the goat scene,
which
with
is like right early on, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
to the dog scene.
The dog scene is
to-
legitimately, I can't remember the last time I was watching a movie and I'm just like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
that was my reaction
Yep.
to that when I saw it. I was taken
To
so off
the-
guard, man.
To the mother reclamation scene, where he's driving on the side of the road. That,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah, this movie's got a lot of moments. It was in consideration for me. I had issues with the third act and
I
some of the
still loved it.
familiarity
It's so
of
bleak.
what happens with the kids that I wasn't so into.
It's so bleak. It's so amazing.
is very
it's
bleak.
so dark.
It is kind of soap opera-y at times, you know.
I wouldn't say that necessarily.
Little
but
bit here and there, you know, with the relationship aspect between, you know, the father, whatever.
Maybe.
But yeah, early on, the reveal of a particular character and the possession and just that visual was horrifying.
Yeah, it's a possession movie, not an exorcism movie.
Yeah.
So it's you've never seen a possession movie done like this before.
No, it's definitely ambitious. That's for sure. Even if I had some storytelling quirks, which are, you know, their quips or in criticism, which is the only thing that kept it out of my list.
I loved it. It blew me away, and it gave me an experience as a horror fan unlike which I've had in many, many years. So that's why I took my number 1 spot.
Yep, and my number 1 has already been revealed because Cecil talked about it a moment ago, and it is Talk to Me. Talk to Me is already in active development because of how successful this film was. So I watched it a second time just recently, and I was so much more impressed, especially with things like little subtle nuances that hint at things throughout without spoiling stuff, where I'm just like, oh man, they were kind of showing us this, and what a performance from our lead. And you know, this is where you have kind of a gimmicky setup, and yet the execution was done so masterfully. And for the fact that these guys cut their teeth with all of these more jokey skit sort of videos, and yet this showed that they were honing those skills to do something like this. And this was another film where the beginning, something that happens with a character, and I was just like, oh shit, okay, man, you know. And the ending is dark and yet perfect in the way, like the cyclical nature of stuff, without actually getting into anything. And just the nuance of the intention of what a character, who a character thinks is communicating with her. And as you start to, in the second watch through, there is so much more indicated that just, I don't know, it enriched it and made it that much better for me. I know that it's like topping a lot of lists, but I think it's happening for a reason, because this was like a force of nature in horror, and I think that's why. I know Jason Smith said that it was overhyped for him and the burden of expectation. You know, he was like, it was pretty good, but I didn't love it. So this was one that was hyped up, and I had heard about the bidding war at Sundance and everything, and it still lived up, and it was even better for me on the second viewing. Talk to Me, my number 1 of the year.
Yep. All right. Well, there you go, guys. I mean, that's pretty extensive thoughts on everything. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments down below on our picks. If you have a different top 10, go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. You know, we'll be checking it out and seeing if you guys are alike, or if you have even movies that we hadn't got to see this year. There's still a couple of lower budget movies that I didn't get around to, but I feel like I got my hands on all the ones that were getting the best scores through the year, so I'd be very curious about your thoughts. Yeah,
there's a few things on Shudder that I didn't get the chance to, but they were not of the hyped by other critics and contemporaries and stuff, so hopefully I'll get to them at some point, you know. But they were putting out like sometimes a new release every week, you know, during certain months, and so with being back in school, it was a lot to keep up with.
So there you go, guys. Again, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
And gracias a Jaime Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.